the voice of the Atlanta Falcons and the Georgia Tech Yellow Jackets. There aren't many guys that are able to do the college and the pro game together, and he does an amazing job at both. Wes Durham joins us here on the News Sentinel Sports page. Hey, Wes, Vince, and Jesse, how you doing this morning?
Good, Vince. Nice to be with you, bud.
Well, great to have you back on. There aren't many of you, right, that do both college and the NFL? A handful, right?
Well, there are four of us that do college football for a school and then do the NFL on Sunday for a team. Gene Deckerhoff does Florida State and Tampa Bay.
Mm-hmm.
Bill Hillgrove does the University of Pittsburgh and the Steelers. And then Dan Horde is in his second year of doing the Cincinnati Bearcats and also the Bengals. So there are four of us, and it's fun. I'm not going to lie to you. This time of year, it's unbelievable. But when you get all three going, it gets a little nuts. So from mid-November until you finish up your two footballs, it could be a little bizarre.
Yeah, and some basketball as well for the Georgia Tech Yellow Jackets.
Once you get basketball going in mid-November, or now they start it too early for me, but once you get going from early November on, it can still be bananas. So to your point, I'm in Durham here now. We play Duke tonight in basketball, and then Georgia Tech does not play basketball this weekend, which actually helps given the NFC game on Sunday.
Wes Durham, voice of the Atlanta Falcons, joining us. We're going to preview the NFC Championship game. And you said bananas and how it gets nuts. Boy, the Atlanta Falcons certainly help you out with that, with their late-game drama, right?
You know, it's kind of, although Sunday was probably to the extreme a little bit, Vince and Jesse, it's kind of become an old hat for this group. And that's a horrible thing for the radio announcer because you're sitting there dying on every play. But it has they've made it almost like their calling card since Matt Ryan's rookie year, but in particular this year because they've done it a couple different times, both against the Panthers and Raiders at home. And then what they pulled Sunday was just one extreme to the other. I had somebody tell me after the game it was almost like we played 5 games in one, just given the momentum shifts that went on. But they found a way, and really that's kind of who this team is. Their resiliency has been a characteristic they've had since Mike Smith became their head coach, and I think it'll serve them well Sunday in what I think is just a tremendous challenge against San Francisco.
Wes, what kind of sense do you get from the city of just how much they're clamoring for a Super Bowl win?
Well, Jesse, it's an interesting point, and one that I think all of us in the Southeast can kind of relate to because of the presence of college football. Atlanta, as everybody knows, is a fairly transient collective town. In other words, let me just use this analogy. On Saturdays, everybody's got their team, okay?
Mm-hmm.
And it might be Tech, it might be Georgia, it might be Tennessee, it might be Alabama, Auburn, Florida State, Clemson, South Carolina, whatever. Well, the one thing the Falcons have done here in the last few years, in particular the last 5, is they've developed an investment with their fans. In other words, they've played so well that people, and obviously when you win, people gravitate to your team. And so the Falcons have picked up some fans. We noticed it this year on the road at places like San Diego and Kansas City, that there were Falcon fans, starting to really kind of develop in those markets. And so in the Southeast, and in particular in Atlanta, on Saturday you invest with whoever your team is, okay? And then on Sunday, everybody collectively invest in this team. Now, sure, there's still folks that are Giants fans or Jets fans or there's Steeler fans everywhere. But the reality of it is that the Falcons have really gotten a fan base riled up. And last Sunday was unbelievable. 1 o'clock kick, and it was full at 12:45, 12:50. And it was loud. I mean, it was as loud for a day game in Atlanta as I've heard it in a long, long time.
Joined by Wes Durham, the voice of the Atlanta Falcons and the Georgia Tech Yellow Jackets, previewing the NFC Championship game. Falcons and the 49ers for the first game on Sunday. Vince Ferrara, Jesse Smithey. So you mentioned you complimented the 49ers. When you're watching them and preparing for this game, what are the things you see that make this a real challenge for the Falcons?
You mean outside of a 6'4", 220-pound quarterback runs like a gazelle?
I had noticed him.
Yeah. Who corkscrewed a linebacker in the ground last week. To me, Vince, as good as they are on offense, and I think they're good on offense, I think they're really, really good on defense. I think you're talking about Patrick Willis and Navarro Bowman inside, and then you're talking about a guy like Deshaun Golson in the secondary, and then you're talking about a front with Aldon Smith and Justin Smith and Sopaga, who's just a beast inside. I mean, Sopaga's like a couch, and you got to get him moved on every play. It's going to be a challenge for Atlanta to create some balance offensively. If they can run the ball like they did last week, I think they got a tremendous chance to win the ball game. But if they can't run the ball and become one-dimensional, then their defense is going to have to answer the call as well.
What do you think about Colin Kaepernick and his shelf life in the NFL? It seems to I know he's doing well right now. Kind of has a real upright running style, though. It could be prone to injury somewhere down the line.
Well, I think he if he doesn't learn to duck, he'll get the fool beat out of him. Because I think you've got to learn, and that's what, and to take a page of that, Jesse, that's what RG3's learning. You can't live out in space all the time. If you do, you're going to create trouble for yourself. But I think Kaepernick is a talented kid. I think he's more toward Cam Newton than he is toward a lot of people want to put him with Russell Wilson or with RG3 or maybe even Michael Vick. I think he's more toward the Cam Newton. I mean, this is a big kid now. I mean, he's 6'4", 225. Cam Newton is a 6'5", 250, 245 kid. I mean, that's more toward Kaepernick's area as opposed to what's going on at the other end of the spectrum with those guys. But he does have to learn to protect his body a little bit. And I think because the league is a game of adjustments, you'll see Atlanta make him pay the price if he tries to keep the ball out on the perimeter. This game will get pretty physical from his perspective if he runs the ball a lot, because that's a way to diminish the return that San Francisco would get from him carrying the ball. You
mentioned the comparison somewhat to Cam Newton. The Carolina Panthers gave the Atlanta Falcons, as you well know, some trouble this year.
Yeah, in the second game for sure.
Yeah. What do you think they will defending that zone read? You mentioned they'll make them pay the price, but is that something, that zone read, that gave the Falcons trouble in those two meetings?
Well, and then there are adjustments to it as well because, Atlanta, everybody – the national media events is pointing to the second game you're talking about where Newton had the big run, the 75-yard run. To me, when I look at Newton and I look at what Atlanta did against RG3, he had like 2 or 3 carries for under 15 yards. Michael Vick was basically held in check. For the most part, until Wilson was completely flush on the pocket, there were no design runs for Russell Wilson because Atlanta hemmed it up on the read. Not that Kaepernick doesn't present problems, because he does. But I think they've got to be cognizant that you keep them from you got to keep them from dictating the pace of the game. If they're allowed to dictate the pace of the game, then San Francisco is going to be the beneficiary of that. These games come down to, in my opinion, not necessarily, is San Francisco's offense going to roll Atlanta's defense or is Atlanta's offense going to roll San Francisco's defense? It's to the tempo to which a team plays. And I know that sounds strange, but in the NFL, that to me is the quotient that really does decide winning and losing. It's the way that comes together, and I think on Sunday, Atlanta's ability to contain them. In other words, you can have a scoring drive, but you can't have 4 scoring drives like you did in the second half last week against Seattle. You've got to find a way to kind of keep these guys locked in.
Wes, I don't watch the Falcons a lot, but when I do, I just never cease to be amazed by Tony Gonzalez and that he's still out there making plays. He's, I think, 70 yards away from a 1,000-yard season. It seems like he's a 50-year-old out there. He's been around so long. I mean, how has he been able to still stay productive at age, I think, 36 now?
Yeah, he's 36. Jesse, he is a remarkable athlete. He's a remarkable person, to be quite frank with you. He's an incredible person to be with. His preparation, and I'll say this with you guys because I know you're around them a lot with Tennessee and some of the other SEC schools. Every major college football player in the country ought to be required to go watch Tony Gonzalez practice. Because if they watch Tony Gonzalez practice, he comes out 20 minutes before every practice and goes through a series of drills. And those drills are his drills. They are designed, to catch balls, to make sure his feet are right, that he's warmed up running a route, as he's warmed up on a sled, on his knees, hitting the blocking sled to make sure his technique is correct. It's almost like a golfer going to hit range balls, okay? And he does it for 20 minutes. And he showed up in Atlanta 4 years ago, and he started doing this before every practice. Well, slowly but surely, Roddy White got involved in it. Then all of a sudden, a year ago, Julio Jones picked up on it. And Terry Robisky, the receivers coach, nailed it. He said, Wes, Tony Gonzalez's impact on this franchise is going to be felt long after he retires because of what he does to get ready to play. And I said, you just don't show up and be great. And he said that's exactly right. He's trying to teach these guys in small steps to be great. And I've had some college coaches who've come to watch him practice who cannot believe the attention to detail he pays to go be great. And it's a huge compliment to him, and I think it's one of the things that makes him special.
Visiting with Wes Durham, voice of the Atlanta Falcons, previewing the NFC Championship game here on the new Senintel Sports page. Getting that playoff win, getting that behind Matt Ryan and this football team, what kind of mindset does that put this team in this game now on Sunday?
Well, I think it loosens the noose, so to speak. Vince, I think they'll play loose. I think that, kind of all the chips are on the table now. They've got a chance to really have a run here, but this is quite a challenge. But I don't think they'll play maybe as with much pent-up emotion or apprehension as they did last Sunday. And I didn't think they played tight, but in the second half you really wondered. And now all of a sudden you're going to see how this team maybe can play. And the other part about it that I really like for this team is they're not favored. They've just kind of been the stepchild to the NFC all year long. And the beauty of it is they're a 4-point underdog at home in their own building. I think somebody said it's the first time in 30 championship games the home team's been a dog. And the beauty of it is, as I joked with somebody yesterday at the complex, Vince and Jesse, if they win this game and the Patriots win, they'll be an underdog in the Super Bowl like you've never seen. And that's kind of the way they've played all year. They've kind of played with nobody wanting to believe that they're good. And in fact, I think they are pretty good.
And they'll be just fine with that scenario.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. They love it.
Last thing, any injuries a factor on either side for this game?
Well, I think John Abraham, the defensive end, is going to go right up to game time in terms of effectiveness. I think he'll play, but, on the scale of 0 to 100, where's he going to be? And I'd say right now he's probably 65%, but they've got to try and get him toward 100% before kickoff. Got
a couple of Knoxville kids, as you well know.
Oh, yeah.
Tyson
Claybo is one for sure.
Yeah, and Garrett Reynolds, too. And so we've been following the Falcons for that reason and giving updates throughout the year. Say hello to your partner, David Archer.
I will.
Arch
Take care,
fan.
Vince. Great to be with you guys.
Thanks, Wes. Appreciate it. Take care. That is Wes Durham. Terrific play-by-play announcer.